All right. Can you hear me? All right. Thank you so much, Valerie. That was indeed a pleasure in Sonnenhof. That was a supreme pleasure. And the part that's not quite correct is that I didn't go to Henry's session, the 2-week session before the 4-week. I just attended the 4-week session with you and John. But yeah, what a time that was. And so thank you, Henry. And I wanted to thank all the teachers and the students who have given talks this past year on Zoom with us and for us. And it's been such a rich experience of teaching, and we're incredibly fortunate. And so thank you all, teachers and students and Venerable Assembly. Welcome. And tomorrow's my eldest son Gabe's 35th birthday, so I wanted to dedicate this talk to Gabriela Sul. So, our last session, it was just last week, led by Valerie, our full moon bright mirror session. And Unmon, the great, eloquent Chinese Zen master, Unmon, who died in 949, he seemed to play a central role in our session. And so I chose case 16 of the woman koan, which is the no-gate gateway, but it's Unmon is in this koan. And in David Hinton's translation of the no-gate gateway, he calls it the bell sound 7-piece. So, and Unmon in Japanese is Unmon. I mean, in Chinese it's Unmon, Japanese Unmon, and Unmon translates to cloud gate. So, the case. Cloudgate said, "The world here stretches boundless away. So why let the bell sound tell you when to don your 7-piece robe?" So another translation. This is from Yamada Koen Roshi, on the Gateless Gate. It says, Unmon said, "The world is vast and wide like this. Why do we put on our 7-piece robe at the sound of the bell?" That's the end of the koan there. In Yamada Koan, he explains that early every morning, the temple bell is rung and the monks don their 7-piece robes and go to the meditation hall to participate in the morning ceremonies. This rakusu is a miniature version of the robes, the 7-piece robe. It has panels, and it's not the most formal one. It's just the regular everyday robe. So, in our session, in the Q&A section, grief came up And I thought we'd talk about grief tonight a bit. In our session, it was the individual and personal grief that life sometimes inflicts on us humans. This heart-wrenching, gut-wrenching predicaments, and almost unbearable for us humans. And having dear friends in those predicaments and being with them, sitting with them, how do we sit with grief? How do we practice with grief? So Valerie told us a story, which I'm going to retell, about a woman who was stricken with cancer of the mouth and throat and jaw. And surgeons had to remove part of her lower jaw. And this beautiful woman named Mary, with this deadly and disfiguring disease of the face, she was pissed. She was raging with anger, and how could this happen to me? This is just not acceptable. She couldn't accept it. And there was a priest who had the courage to visit with her and sit with her and try and ease her pain, but he had no success. She was just unreachable. But one day, the priest tried again. He went on a visit to see Mary, and he reported that there was a presence of love in the room. And a voice spoke through him. And it said, "Mary, the only way to get beyond the pain you're experiencing now is absolute surrender." I'm going to read that again. Mary, the only way to get beyond the pain you're experiencing now is absolute surrender. And these words hit home. And Mary said later that after that, my life was no longer my life. It had little to do with me. So, now I want to look at our collective grief of this full planetary catastrophe that we're facing, that we can't seem to just turn our back from it. We can't not face it. It's in our face constantly now. It's on our minds constantly. It's, we as a species have brought this catastrophe on ourselves. And the knowledge that our presence on the planet is causing this sixth great extinction. We're destroying this great earth that has sustained us. And this sustains all life for so many millions of years. This is profound, heart-wrenching grief. And somehow we have to take it in and embrace it and surrender to the truth of that. It's, To quote David Loy, our civilization is self-destructing. We're facing the greatest challenge that mankind has ever faced. A great change has to come, and we all know it. And it's up to us to make it happen, because it's our Bodhisattva vows. When Ruben Habito gave a talk, he quoted Charles Eisenstein, a brilliant young thinker, and Charles Eisenstein said, "Our work is to bring into being a beautiful world our hearts know is possible." So that's our work in the face of, this catastrophe. But not to, I'm not trying to be a downer or anything. I'm just trying to not sugarcoat the situation either. So anyway, we're going to go back in time now to May 11th, 2020. Our newsletter. The message from Henry part, where it said, it's entitled Experience. And it was a link to an international collective of artists called koan. And one of the artists was Henry's niece. Koan translates to experience. It means experience maybe in Finnish or something. So this link led me to an essay that was being circulated in the collective, an essay called The Carrier Bag Theory. It was written by the famous visionary author Ursula Le Guin, who was a fierce advocate for the natural world and especially forests. So here's a summary of the carrier bag theory. Ursula Le Guin tells the story of human origin by redefining technology as a cultural carrier bag rather than a weapon of domination. The carrier bag theory of human evolution proposes, quote, before the tool that forces energy outward, we made the tool that brings energy home. Prior to the preeminence of sticks, swords, and the hero's killing tools of violence and competition, our ancestors' greatest invention was the container, the basket of wild oats, the medicine bundle, the net made of your own hair, the home, the shrine, the place that contains whatever is sacred. That's a brief. Anyway, we'll get back to the carrier bag later. But now I'm gonna read a few excerpts from one of my favorite books. Brilliant book and a brilliant man, brilliant author, David Abrams, Becoming Animal. We're going to start with the intro, part of the intro. It says, owning up to being an animal, a creature of earth, turning our animal senses to the sensible terrain, blending our skin with the rain-rippled surface of rivers, mingling our ears with the thunder and the thrumming of frogs, and our eyes with the molten sky, feeling the polyrhythmic pulse of this place, this huge windswept body of water and stone, this vexed being in whose flesh we're entangled, becoming earth, becoming animal, becoming in this manner fully human. So that's how the book starts. Now I'm going to read this next excerpt is, he speculates on the origins of our internal dialogue. This is sort of interesting. He says, in truth, it's likely that our solitary sense of inwardness, our experience of an interior mindscape to which we alone have access, is born of the forgetting or sublimation of a much more ancient interiority that was once our common birthright. The ancestral sense of the surrounding earthly cosmos as the voluminous inside of an immense body or tent or temple. And again, here we're going to go, here he's going to talk about the atmosphere. Which he was, noting that when the earth is spinning on its axis, the clouds aren't going the other way, so maybe they're part of the earth, So anyway, he says, unless, of course, the clouds themselves are a part of the turning earth, in which case I'm not really standing on the surface of this world, but am submerged within a transparent layer of this planet, an invisible stratum of the earth that extends far above those clouds. Unless that is the unseen substance that rides along these slopes, whispering the needles and rubbing the branches against one another, this tangible but utterly ungraspable element that swirls between my legs and pours in and out through my nostrils, the fluid medium through which those clouds are floating, and of whose lightness they partake, of which they are a kind of visible thickening or crystallization, is not at all continuous with the space that hosts the sun and stars, but it is an element of this earth, an amniotic substance entirely proper to this place, which indeed it is. The air is not a random bunch of gases simply drawn to earth by Earth's gravity, but an elixir generated by the soils, the oceans, and the numberless organisms that inhabit this world, each creature exchanging certain ingredients for others as it inhales and exhales, drinking the sunlight with our leaves or filtering the water with our gills, all of us contributing to the composition of this phantasmagoric brew, circulating it steadily between us and nourishing ourselves on its magic, generating ourselves from its substance. It is as endemic to the earth as the sandstone beneath my boots. Perhaps we should add a letter I to our planet's name and call it Earth, E-A-I-R-T-H, in order to remind ourselves that the air is entirely a part of the earth, and that the I, small I, the capital I, or the self, is wholly immersed in that fluid element. The gilt-edged clouds overhead are not plunging westward as the planet rolls beneath them, because they themselves are a part of the roiling earth. Creatures of the embracing air, of an invisible but nonetheless material layer of this planet, the clouds accompany the earth as it turns, their shape-shifting bodies drifting this way and that with the winds, and we, imbibing and strolling through the same air, do not then live on the earth, but in it. We are unfolded within it, permeated, carnally immersed in the depths of this breathing planet. All right, so Mother Earth. And one more, I think. Yeah, maybe two more. Yeah, here the author speaks about Spinoza. Spinoza, who was born in Amsterdam in 1632. And he was recognized as a brilliant scholar at a very young age. And Spinoza was impressed with Descartes, but he disagreed with his conclusions. And Spinoza came to the conclusion that the mind and the body are one and the same thing. And this was so heretical that he was excommunicated and banished from the Jewish community of Amsterdam. Spinoza accepted this exile without objection, remarking that it left him freer to pursue his researches without distraction. So here's an excerpt where David Abrams compares modern cognitive researchers to Spinoza. That's the wrong one. Hold on. Un momento. Okay. So here. So he's comparing Spinoza to, modern research. He says very few of those participant in the current turn, quote unquote, turn toward the body seem to notice the wider, more subversive implication of their work. While they assert that the entirety of the body is integral to the mind, surely they assume it is only the human body that has this privilege, and not the body of an elk, or an aspen grove, or the dense flesh of the ground itself. Surely the gushing body of a river or the ebb and flow of the breeze has no real part in intelligence. It is here that their timidity contrasts with the far-seeing audacity of Spinoza. He alone saw that the human mind could never be reconciled with the human body unless intelligence was recognized and as an attribute of nature in its entirety. To Spinoza, every sensible phenomena had its own mental aspect. Every tangible body within the material world was also an idea within the vast encompassing intelligence that was known inwardly to some as God and outwardly to all as nature. Yeah, anyway. So, yeah, we're going to go back to the carrier bag. So anyway, Becoming Animal. Love this book. So this is straight out of the essay. It was written in 1986. And Ursula Le Guin, I believe she died in 2018, not too long ago. But anyway, it starts off. In the temperate, here. In the temperate and tropical regions, where it appears that hominids evolved into human beings, the principal food of the species was vegetable. 65 to 80% of what human beings ate in those regions in the Paleolithic, Neolithic, and prehistoric times was gathered. So 65 to 80% of what human beings ate was gathered. Only in the extreme Arctic was meat the staple food. The mammoth hunters spectacularly occupy the cave wall and the mine. But what we actually did to stay alive and fat was gather seeds and roots, sprouts, shoots, leaves, nuts, berries, fruits, and grains, adding bugs and mollusks, and netting or snaring birds, fish, rats, rabbits, and other tuskless small fry to up the protein. And we didn't even work hard at it, much less hard than peasants slaving in somebody else's field after agriculture was invented, much less hard than paid workers since civilization was invented. The average prehistoric person could make a nice living in about 15-hour work week. It says 15 hours a week for subsistence leaves a lot of time for other things. So much time that maybe the restless ones who didn't have a baby around to enliven their lives, or skill in making, or cooking, or singing, or very interesting thoughts to think, decided to slope off and hunt mammoths. The skillful hunters then would come staggering back with a load of meat, a lot of ivory, and a story. It wasn't the meat that made the difference, it was the story. So, and she didn't want to tell that story of man, the ascent of man. So, let's see. So yeah, let's revisit the koan. The world is vast and wide like this. So why do we put on our 7-panel robe at the sound of the bell? So this rakusu is symbolic of the original robes worn by the first followers of the Buddha. The story goes that after renouncing their possessions, they went to the city dumps and picked out pieces of cloth and washed them and dyed them and sewed them into robes. So we hand sew these rakusus in preparation for the jukai ceremony. Jukai meaning receiving the precepts. And for months we worked with our teacher. In my case, it was Pat Hawk, who was a student of Robert Aiken, who started the Diamond Sangha, which was a branch of the Sambo Kyodan lineage. So, I always felt we were always in the same lineage myself. So you work with your teacher for months in preparation for receiving the precepts, or also called the 16 Bodhisattva Valves. So it says, let me back up one step or I will violate one of my vows. I tried to sew my rakusu myself. I tried to pin it all together and then sew the panels together, and I tried many times and it was just a terrible mess. And you know, well, I was in a bind, and my friend Lucy Brennan stepped up, and she sewed it for me, and which is, cheating, but it was better than, than what I was coming up with. So thanks again, Lucy. And Sandy Anderson, actually, I wanted to mention this. Sandy made this carrier bag for my Rakasu, which keeps it out of harm's way. So, it was a group effort back in 1999. And thank you, Sandy. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the 16 Bodhisattva Valves. It begins with the 3 vows of refuge. I take refuge in the Buddha, I take refuge in the Dharma, I take refuge in the Sangha. And the student has to respond to each of these vows. There's 16, he has to make 16 responses to all the different vows as they come up. And the teacher, you're down below, and the teacher's in front of you, and the assembly's all around you, and the assembly takes part in the ceremony, the teacher and you. Everybody has a part to play. And it's profound. And then after the 3 vows of refuge come the 3 pure precepts, which in a nutshell, I vow to renounce all evil, I vow to practice all good, I vow to save the many beings. And then it goes into the 10 grave precepts, which begins not killing, not stealing, not misusing sex, and so on, to the 10th. So these are the vows of the Bodhisattva path. That it's optional, we don't have to take vows, and you can be a perfectly legitimate and full-on Buddhist, without taking the vows. But I decided I would take them. And the ceremony always takes place at the end of sesshin, and it's powerful. So, why do we put on our 7-panel robe at the sound of the bell? So, hearing the sound of the bell with our whole being, our whole earth body, vast and wide, we respond. Hearing the cries of the world with our whole vast being, selflessly, we respond. Our practice on the cushions informs our work in the world. David Loy says of Buddhist activism, it's an activism based on love. The path doesn't teach us what to do, it teaches us how to do it. Skillful means. So we gather our special gifts, our skills, our tools, our medicine, our experience. We gather it all into our carrier bags, our survival kit. The bell sounds, we make it to our cushions. Every day, We practice. We practice our concentration, our mindfulness, our selflessness. We practice our melting into our true nature, our Buddha nature. And we gather the fruits of our practice into our carrier bag, this boundless container of all that we are. Joanna Macy says, we bring forth the best that's within us. She thinks this particular time in history is so exciting because we have no choice but to bring forth the best that's within us for our survival or survival of our kids, our grandkids, and so on, of all the species on the planet. So yeah, we gather our survival kit, our medicine bag, our carrier bag, and we step out into the world and we do our best. We do the best we can. David Loy says, this way of living in the world, helping in the world, becomes our passion and joy. So, in closing, what if all the temple bells all over the world just started sounding? Boom, boom, boom. And all the church bells all over the world just started ringing. All the bells all over just started ringing. And they wouldn't stop. And the people came out from their homes and their shelters and came out from their offices and buildings. And all the traffic stopped and people got out of their cars and trucks and buses and whatever all over the world. And the bells just kept ringing all over the world. And the people looked at each other and said, what is going on? What is going on? What is going on? Thank you.